What are your prime directives?
Serve the public trust. Protect the innocent.
Thank you!
Uphold the law.
It's dangerous!
It was considered to be just another low-budget science fiction movie with a silly title.
Perhaps you're aware of the RoboCop program developed by myself at Security Concepts.
RoboCop is a little bit like the guy who rides into a corrupt town and cleans it up.
Your move, creep.
And to me, this was very clearly a metaphor of the knight in shining armor.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
It's just such incredibly good filmmaking. It's as tight as a nest of Chinese boxes. I mean, you can just keep opening these lids and finding different things inside, but each one of those boxes is perfectly handcrafted. That film is very, very well put together.
Although the movie is set in the future, like any movie, it's a product of its time. And this is really a product of the Reagan era.
I say good business is where you find it.
I like violence, you know. I like violence in movies. I wanted to show Satan killing Jesus.
Cinematic robots have a long and illustrious history. Some of the earliest films, in fact, either had mechanical people or artificial humans.
There is positively no human agency employed whatsoever in controlling it.
Something what people are dreaming of, nah? Being a person, mankind being a machine. Nah?
Musicians of the world unite. Automation is on the way.
I think there are two films that were important to me when I shot RoboCop, which was The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the other one was Fritz Lang's movie Metropolis. And you can see a lot of parallels, especially with the robot that Lang invented.
Even as early as 1922, Lang sort of foretold and forecast the Western culture's ambivalence about technology. Maria is this beautiful, shining, durable construct that at the same time is manipulative and violent and sexual and all the darker elements of what started to creep into technology and man's awareness of technology.
Ours is a male version of Fritz Lang. We have a little bit more sophisticated outlook, a bit more high-tech, but it's still very close.
RoboCop. Who is he? What is he? Where does he come from?
RoboCop was an idea that I came up with when I was an executive at Universal Pictures, and I couldn't stand my job, so I went off and wrote a screenplay. Michael Miner came through the door and said, "Oh, you want to write a script about a robot? I like robots." And there we were. The first idea for RoboCop was a robot. And then it very quickly it became a man who became a robot.
Ed and I were thinking of two ideas independently. He had an idea called RoboCop, which was about a robot police officer.
What is this shit?
And I was playing with an idea called SuperCop about a character who has an accident and then is hooked up to an appliance that enhances his powers. We were writing RoboCop when Terminator was being finished, and we waited until the script was finished before we saw the film. I guess they could both be called postmodern robot films in the sense that the humor is very dark. I think that the Cameron film is much more a horror film than RoboCop, which to me is social satire with some very real emotions in it.
They brought it to Jonathan Kaplan, and Jonathan Kaplan didn't want to do it. So he suggested that they bring it to me. Orion had produced The Terminator, and I'm sure the success of that film led them to take a chance.
We went over to Orion, and they just said, "Okay, let's go." And it was like, whoa, we sold a script. We're writing it.
We basically went right through the list of every halfway decent American director, and every one of them turned it down. And I have a feeling most of them probably never got past the title page that said RoboCop. They could just envision it on their resume, you know, thinking, no, I don't want to go there. Everybody had reservations about the title because the title is just basically silly. And no matter who you told the title to, you could just see it, the expression on their face like, God, why are they involved with such a piece of junk, you know? So we often thought about trying to come up with a better title, but it stuck.
In fact, I remember Orion saying, We can never sell it with that title. It's stupid. It sounds like a kid's movie. But in the end, a title that tells you what the movie is really quite good.
Action! Go!
I'd always been this huge fan of Paul Verhoeven. Barbara Boyle had just finished doing Flesh and Blood with him for Orion. She said, well, let me send it to Paul Verhoeven. Paul was having trouble in Holland. He just was not getting along with the people in the film business there, I guess.
First movies that I did, included Soldier of Orange, were always financed by government that was right wing. Now when the government changed to the left wing, I started to have problems. It started already with spatters, because they thought it was decadent and perverted.
Paul's a director. He can direct actors. Beautiful camera work. I mean, Kichi Tipple, Soldier of Orange, Spatters, Turkish Delight. I mean, these are good pictures. I can't imagine in a million years that Paul Verhoeven would want to do this picture. And sure enough, he said no.
When I got finally that script of RoboCop and I read it, I thought it was extremely silly and stupid. I threw it on the floor and saying, I'm not going to shoot this kind of rubbish. My wife picked up that script RoboCop and read it. And she said, you know, yeah, this is perhaps not, it's not Shakespeare, but it is a script with more layers than you think.
Martine read it and said, there's decapitations and people getting their arms ripped off. You'll like it. And indeed, he said, well, I have never seen the hero get his hand blown off.
And he sent us a telegram saying that he would do the picture. And no one was more shocked than I.
In the movies like Turkish Delight or Soldier of Orange, The Forced Man and Spatters, which are the most well-known in the United States, you are really talking about people and no, not special effects. So it's strange because I had never done anything like that. And it was not that I was craving to do it. It was not that I thought, my God, I remember these movies out of my youth and I want to do them myself. I think that in general I would say that I was not a big fan of science fiction.
Doesn't matter, we're going to blank his memory anyway.
I think it's really amazing if you look at Paul's work. There's nothing that indicates anything like this before, and he effortlessly pulls that off.
Well, he signed the release forms when he joined the force. He's legally dead. We can do pretty much what we want to.
This cynical, very unblinking look at violence was something that Paul could do.
Ooh, guns.
A good director can adopt to any kind of genre, to any genre. That's the key. If the guy's got talent, he can do anything, you know, and Paul can do anything.
I often say that he is a visceralist, not a visualist. Kubrick's a visualist. He is very cold and concise, and he wants you to see it and study it. And Paul wants you to be reacting like, shit, the next one might hit me.
As I started to work with the writers, I picked up so many layers and additional elements, and I got really inspired by what was already on the paper, by extending that, emphasizing it, pushing it. And so that ultimately it might be my best American movie.
Foreign directors critique America better than Americans can because they're on the outside and they approach it anthropologically. And that's another thing that I think Paul brought to the material.
I really have a lot of respect for Paul. He's the real deal. He's like a real director. You know, he's totally focused.
It was really me thinking, okay, science fiction is not my genre, but I think I understand something of the soul of RoboCop. And there is something artistic about the whole project. And something humanitarian, if you want to.
Murphy, transferring in from Metro South.
We had been looking for an actor that could do a RoboCop for a very long time. And we didn't make any progress. For a moment, we thought that we would take Michael Ironside.
We saw Michael Ironside and liked him a lot, but he was a little too big, we thought, to fit the costume.
It was a given from the beginning that they would have to find a certain body type because they were literally going to construct the robo-suit around the actor. So you didn't want someone who was too large because you would have all kinds of problems about, you know, fitting the person into it and also being able to move.
After 3-4 months of searching, we still hadn't found anybody. And then ultimately somebody called us and said, well, Peter Weller is in New York and why don't you visit him? He might be interested.
Peter Weller made a bit of a splash on a film called Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension. And John Davison certainly was aware of Peter's work in Buckaroo Banzai, so he was one of the people who tested for it.
I pointed out that it would be a life of suffering and that he would not be happy.
Peter had martial arts training, so that was appealing. We knew that a lot of his performance would be mime, so we needed somebody who liked the idea of doing mime.
He started immediately to take lessons about choreographing his steps, basically how he would have to walk with a RoboCop costume on.
Peter very much had in mind these kind of quick bird-like movements, particularly when he is fighting.
Originally, we had cast Stephanie Zimbalist in the role of Lewis. And a couple of weeks before we started shooting, she pulled out. So we were in a mad scramble to find someone to replace her. And fortunately, we found Nancy Allen, who was available.
I haven't really had a chance to introduce myself. I'm Ann Lewis.
Nancy Allen, primarily before that, had been playing kind of shallow, bitchy teenage characters. Carrie, of course, is her signature part. But she was also always known for having these long strawberry curls. Very first thing Paul said to her is, "Cut your hair."
I'm a mess.
Paul was actually trying, once again, to take a performer with an established persona and tweak it.
You really don't remember me, do you?
Dick Jones, the character who Ronny Cox plays, is one of the most evil, manipulative, and corrupt of the OCP officials.
You just fucked with the wrong guy.
But prior to playing Dick Jones, Ronny Cox, for the most part, had played the exact opposite type of character. Wholesome family man or country guitar strumming, ordinary guys. Just very, very nice characters.
I'm confident that we can go to prototype within 90 days.
Rob Bottin, who created the suit, works by sculpting everything in clay three-dimensionally. He started doing a number of full-size sculptures of RoboCop, very little 2D art. We would go over, we being Ed Neumeyer, the writer, and Paul Verhoeven and myself would go over to Rob's shop and watch this thing progress. I mean, for a while he looked like Judge Dredd. For a while he looked like, a real superhero with a huge chest and shoulders. But we always went back to sleek, like a product of Detroit in a way.
If Braun, the German company, had made a knight in shining armor, that's what he would look like.
Ed had found these Japanese comic books where they make this kind of bulky robots with big shoulders, but then in steel. Rob's costume in the beginning was much more like a kind of a bit modernistic version of Fritz Lang. But we thought, we are going to do something better. This Japanese comic books will help us to make it really revolutionary instead of being influenced by the past, and we fucked it up completely. That was a big explosion, artistic explosion between our group nearly and Rob Bottin, who ultimately said, I cannot work this way. Then I think we stepped backwards finally, but when we had lost already months by fooling around. By the time we stepped backwards, he had lost 40–50% of what was good, so it was terrible. Rob Bottin was extremely frustrated, and he couldn't even talk to us anymore, certainly not to me, who he saw as the main guilty person.
Rob figured out that the way to do this would be to create an undersuit that would be flexible, and then to create a harness that fit over the undersuit where you could hang solid pieces of the fiberglass exoskeleton.
Sometimes we were really rubbing it with oil or wax or something that it really got shiny, and I always put a lot of different lights from different directions so that the appearance of the RoboCop was like a figure of reflections. You could always see it outlined in light. It has a power. I always got the camera very low, on very low angles, and the lower the camera is, the more the camera looks up to him, the bigger RoboCop appears.
Okay, stay with me as I have some cool behind-the-scenes trivia. Stop motion has featured prominently in famous science fiction films. 2 of the RoboCop movies feature the stop motion technique at work, and the finale of the first Terminator film was done with stop motion. Now, do you like my shirt? You can get one for yourself in the shop under this video, and remember to click here below to subscribe for more great content.